The night my parents threw me out of the house, my mother handed me a black trash bag and told me I had 10 minutes to pack. I was 17 years old. It was raining outside. And I remember standing at the top of the stairs, staring at that bag in her hand, trying to understand how the people who had raised me could look at me like I was a stranger. My father stood behind her with his arms crossed. Neither of them looked angry. That was the part that frightened me. They looked calm, as if they had already decided that I no longer belonged there. My mother pointed toward my bedroom. "Take what you need," I whispered. "What?" "You heard me. Where am I supposed to go?" My father finally spoke. "That's not our problem anymore." I stared at him. "You can't be serious." He looked away. My little brother was standing halfway down the stairs. His name was Ethan. He was 12. He looked terrified. "Ethan," I whispered. He didn't move. I looked at my mother. "Please, just tell me what I did," she sighed. "You know exactly what you did." "I don't." "You embarrassed this family." I shook my head. "I didn't." My father slammed his hand against the railing. "Nuff." I flinched. Then he pointed toward my room. 10 minutes. I walked into my bedroom. My hands were shaking so badly that I could barely open my closet. I grabbed 2 pairs of jeans, 3 shirts, a sweater, my old sneakers, a small photograph of my grandmother, and the little silver necklace she had given me before she died. Everything else stayed behind. My school books, my childhood photographs, my favorite hoodie. The stuffed bear I had kept since I was 6. 8 years later, I would still remember that bear. Because when I came back to that house, it was sitting exactly where I had left it. But I didn't know that yet. I tied the trash bag, then I walked downstairs. My mother opened the front door. Cold rain blew inside. "Where am I supposed to sleep?" I asked one last time. My father said, "Figure it out." I looked at Ethan. He was crying. I wanted to hug him, but my mother stepped between us. "Go." That single word broke something inside me. I walked outside, the door closed behind me, and I stood there in the rain with one trash bag in my hand. 17 years old. No car, no money, no plan, no idea where I would sleep. I looked back at the house. My bedroom light was still on. For 17 years, I had believed that house was my home. That night, I learned the difference between a house and a home. A home is supposed to be where someone asks if you're okay. My parents didn't ask. They watched me walk away. And what I didn't know was that the reason they had thrown me out had almost nothing to do with what they told me. Because 8 years later, when they showed up at my office, they weren't there to apologize. They were there because they needed something from me. And they believed I still didn't know the truth. They were wrong. I walked nearly 3 miles that night. The rain soaked through my clothes. The trash bag ripped once. I picked everything up from the sidewalk and kept going. I remember thinking, maybe they'll call me. Maybe my mother would change her mind. Maybe my father would drive around looking for me. Maybe Ethan would convince them. Maybe this was some horrible mistake. My phone had 3% battery. I called my best friend Olivia. She answered immediately. "Where are you?" I started crying. "What happened?" "I got kicked out." There was silence. Then she said, "Stay where you are." 20 minutes later, Olivia's mother picked me up. When I got into the car, her mother didn't ask questions. She just wrapped a blanket around me. I cried the entire drive. That night, I slept on Olivia's bedroom floor. The next morning, I called my parents. "Mom, what? Can I come home?" She was silent, then she said, "You made your choice." "What choice?" She hung up. I tried my father. Straight to voicemail. I called again. Nothing. I didn't understand. For weeks, I had no idea what I had supposedly done. Then I remembered the argument that happened 2 days before they threw me out. My father had accused me of stealing money. $5,000. He said it had disappeared from an account. I told him I knew nothing about it. He didn't believe me. My mother didn't either. But there had been something strange about that accusation. The money hadn't been in my bank account. It hadn't been used with my card. And I had no access to the account they claimed I had taken it from. Still, they decided I was guilty. Then they found another reason. My father said I had been telling people family secrets. I asked what secrets. He wouldn't tell me. My mother said, "You know what you did." I didn't. At 17, I thought adults knew everything. I thought if I just waited long enough, the truth would come out. It didn't. Instead, I had to finish high school while living with Olivia's family. I got a part-time job at a grocery store. I worked evenings. I studied at night. I learned how to stretch $20 across an entire week. I learned to cook simple meals. I learned that asking for help wasn't weakness. Olivia's family let me stay for 4 months. Then I found a tiny room in a shared apartment. It was nothing like my old bedroom. The ceiling leaked. The heater barely worked. The kitchen was so small that 2 people couldn't stand in it at once. But it was mine. And for the first time in my life, nobody could throw me out. I graduated high school. Then I got accepted into a local college. I worked 2 jobs. I studied. I failed 1 class. I cried. Then I retook it. Slowly, my life changed. And every year, I expected my parents to call. They never did. Not on my 18th birthday. Not on graduation. Not when I got my first real job. Not even when my grandmother's old friend died and left me a small inheritance. 8 years passed. I stopped waiting. I thought I had finally escaped them. Then one Tuesday morning, my assistant walked into my office and said, "There are 2 people here asking for you." I looked up from my computer. Ooh. She hesitated. "They say they're your parents." My heart stopped. 8 years. And suddenly, they were standing outside my office. By the time I was 25, nobody looking at me would have guessed where I had started. I had built a career in corporate consulting. I wasn't rich, but I was successful. I had my own apartment, savings, a small investment account, a reliable car, and, most importantly, peace. I had learned something during those 8 years. You don't have to become the person who hurt you. My parents had made me feel worthless. I didn't become cruel. They had abandoned me. I didn't abandon myself. They had told me I wouldn't survive. I built a life anyway. My company was growing quickly. I had recently been promoted to operations director. My office was on the 14th floor of a glass building downtown. That Tuesday morning had started normally: coffee, emails, a meeting at 9, a presentation at 11. Then my assistant appeared. "There's a man and woman downstairs." "Who are they?" She looked uncomfortable. "They gave me your full name." I felt my stomach tighten. "Did they say what they wanted?" "They said they were your parents." I stared at her. Neither of us spoke. Then she asked, "Do you want security?" I almost said yes. Instead, I said, "No. Send them up." I don't know. Maybe I wanted answers. Maybe some part of me was still 17. Maybe I wanted to hear my father say "I'm sorry." The elevator doors opened, and there they were. My father looked tired. For a second, I saw the people from my childhood. Then the memory returned, the trash bag, the rain, the door closing. I stood. My mother smiled. "Look at you." I didn't smile back. "Why are you here?" My father looked around my office. "You've done well. Why are you here?" My mother sat down without asking. "We need to talk." "No." She looked surprised. "I think you owe us that." I almost laughed. "You threw me out at 17. We had our reasons. You didn't contact me for 8 years. We gave you space." "No." I looked at them. "You abandoned me." My father sighed. "We're your parents. That didn't seem to matter 8 years ago." Silence. Then my mother said, "We need your help." There it was. Not an apology, not regret. A request. What kind of help? My father placed a folder on my desk. I didn't touch it. "What is that?" "It's about the family property." I frowned. "What property?" "The house." My heart started beating faster. "Why are you talking to me about the house?" My mother looked at my father. Then back at me. "Because it's yours." I froze. "What?" She whispered. "It always was." I didn't touch the folder. I just stared at it. "What do you mean?" "It was mine." My father looked uncomfortable. "The house was placed into a trust." "Whose trust?" "Your grandmother's." "My grandmother." The one person in my childhood who had always defended me. She had died when I was 15. I remembered her telling me, "Never let anyone convince you that you are less than you are." At the time, I thought it was just something loving grandmothers said. Now I wondered if she had known something. My mother opened the folder. Inside was a copy of a legal document. My name was on it. My father looked at me. "Your grandmother created the trust before she died." "Why didn't I know?" "You were a child." "Why didn't you tell me when I turned 18? Silence. That silence told me more than words could. "You knew." My mother looked down. "Yes. You knew the house was mine." "Wes. And you still threw me out." And my father spoke softly. "Things were complicated." I shook my head. "They weren't complicated. You were 17. You knew the house belonged to me. We needed time." "For what?" Nobody answered. I opened the document. The trust stated that the house would belong to me when I turned 18. Until then, my parents were allowed to live there as trustees. But they were not allowed to sell it. Not mortgage it. Not transfer it. Not use it for personal debt. And there was another condition: if I was forced out before turning 18 without legal cause, The trustees could lose their right to manage the property. I looked up. Why did you throw me out? My mother began crying. We were trying to protect you. From what? My father said your uncle. I frowned. My uncle. My mother's brother, Robert. I hadn't seen him since I was 12. What does he have to do with this? My father took a breath. He wanted the house. Why? Because your grandmother had left him almost nothing. I stared at him. And you? We were under pressure? From him? From everyone? I shook my head. That doesn't explain why you threw me out. My father looked at my mother. Then he said, because someone told us you had stolen money. The $5,000. He nodded. That was the money. Wes. Who told you? He didn't answer. I leaned forward. Ooh. My mother whispered, Robert. My heart sank. My uncle had accused me of stealing money. He had convinced my parents I was dishonest. He had told them I was betraying the family. And my parents believed him. But why? What did he gain? I turned another page. Then I saw a name, a bank account, a transfer, a signature, my father's signature. And suddenly, I understood. The $5,000 had never been stolen. It had been transferred, by my father, to my uncle. I looked at my father. Did you send him the money? He didn't answer. Did you? My mother started crying. My father finally said, yes. Why? Your uncle threatened us. With what? He shook his head. You wouldn't understand. Try me. He looked exhausted. Robert knew about the trust. I stared at him. He knew. Wes. And he wanted the house. Wes. What did he threaten? My father swallowed. He said if we didn't help him get control of the property, he would expose something. What? My mother said. Your father had been hiding business losses. I looked at my father. He nodded. Years earlier he had invested in a small company. The investment went badly. He borrowed money to cover the losses, then borrowed more. Eventually, he had accumulated a large debt. My mother knew. Robert knew. My grandmother didn't. And then my grandmother died. The trust became active. The house became protected. My father couldn't sell it to pay his debts. Robert discovered this. He offered a solution. If my father could somehow make me appear irresponsible or unfit to manage the property, they could try to challenge the trust. That's why the accusations started. That's why the money disappeared. That's why they searched my room. That's why they claimed I was sharing family secrets. They were building a story. A story that would make me look like a reckless teenager. Then they would argue that I couldn't be trusted with the property. But there was one problem. I had never done any of those things. So they needed evidence. And Robert had created some. The $5,000 had been transferred through an account connected to my name. My father hadn't told me. He had allowed the transaction to happen. Then they blamed me. I stared at him. You destroyed my life to protect yourself. He looked down. I thought it was temporary. Temporary. We thought you'd come back. I laughed bitterly. You threw me into the rain with a trash bag. My mother cried. We were wrong. No, I closed the folder. You weren't confused. They both looked at me. You made a choice. My father said. We're sorry. I finally heard the words I had waited 8 years to hear. But they didn't feel the way I had imagined. Because an apology after 8 years doesn't erase 8 years. I looked at them. Why are you really here? My father hesitated. My mother whispered. Robert is trying to take the house. How? He has documents. What documents? My father looked terrified. He says you signed them. I stared at him. I've never signed anything. That's what we told him. Then why are you afraid? My father looked at me. Because the signature looks like yours. I called an attorney that afternoon. Her name was Sarah. She reviewed the trust documents. Then the supposed transfer. Then the bank records. Then the signature. She didn't speak for several minutes. Finally, she said, this isn't a simple property dispute. I know. Someone has been trying to create a legal trail. What does that mean? They've been building documents over time. She pointed to several dates. This one is from 6 years ago. Another. 4 years ago. Another. 2 years ago. I stared at the papers. They've been doing this for years. Apparently. Sarah leaned back. Who has access to your old identification documents? I thought. Anyone else? My uncle. Why? Because he helped my father with the family business. Sarah nodded. Then we need to know how these signatures were created. We requested copies of the original records. The first strange thing was the signature. It looked like mine. But it wasn't. The second strange thing was the handwriting. The third was the timing. Every document had been created during periods when I was nowhere near the location listed. Sarah checked travel records, school records, employment records, everything. The pattern became obvious. The documents were fake, but who made them? That question led us to an old family accountant. His name was Henry. He had worked with my father for years. When Sarah contacted him, he refused to speak. Then, 2 days later, he called me. I need to meet you. We met at a quiet cafe. Henry looked nervous. He placed a small envelope on the table. I should have told you years ago. I opened it. Inside was a USB drive. What is this? Copies. Of what? Everything your father asked me to prepare. I stared at him. What did he ask you to prepare? Documents making it appear that you had agreed to transfer the property. My hands went cold. Why? Because your father said you were going to sign them. I never did. I know. Then why did you prepare them? Henry looked ashamed. Because I was afraid of losing my job. I swallowed. Did my father know they were fake? And Henry nodded. And my mother? Yes, Robert. Henry hesitated. Then he said. Robert gave the instructions. That was the moment everything became clear. My parents had betrayed me, but they weren't the masterminds. My uncle had been pulling the strings. And now, 8 years later, he was trying again. This time, he wanted the house. But there was one thing he hadn't counted on. I was no longer 17. I was 25. I had a career, an attorney, evidence, and a voice. And I wasn't going to disappear again. Sarah advised me not to meet Robert alone. So we arranged a formal meeting. The location was the house. The house I had been thrown out of 8 years earlier. I hadn't been back since that night. When I walked through the front door, memories came rushing back. The staircase, the hallway, the kitchen, the old clock. Everything looked smaller. My mother stood near the living room. My father was beside her. Robert sat at the table. He looked at me and smiled. Look at you. I didn't answer. He stood. You've become quite successful. Why are you here? He smiled. Family should talk. Family shouldn't fabricate documents. His smile disappeared. I don't know what you're talking about. Sarah placed a folder on the table. Robert sat down. I remained standing. He looked at my parents, then at me. You've been misled by whom? Your parents? I almost laughed. Interesting. He leaned back. They abandoned you. Because of you. He shook his head. That's not true. Henry's USB drive was on the table. I placed a printed email in front of him. His face changed. Then another. Then another. Each one showed instructions sent from his email address. Robert looked at them. Those could be fabricated. Sarah smiled. Why expected you to say that? She placed another document down. That's why we brought the original server records. Silence. Robert looked at my father. My father couldn't meet his eyes. Then Robert said something I will never forget. Your parents were weak. I looked at him. What? They couldn't handle pressure. My mother started crying. Robert continued. They would have given me the house eventually. My father whispered, you promised. Robert looked at him. I promised you could keep living there. I felt sick. The truth was finally coming out. My parents hadn't just been manipulated. They had agreed to the plan because they believed they could save themselves. And Robert had promised them security. Then he turned to me. You don't understand what that house is worth. I understand exactly what it's worth. He smiled. Then sell it. No. You could make a fortune. No. You'll regret it. I looked him directly in the eyes. I already regret trusting people who thought they could take it. He stood. You think you can win. I said, I don't need to win. I pointed toward the documents. I just need the truth to come out. He stared at me. Then he walked away. But before he left, he turned around. This isn't over. I smiled. For you, maybe. 3 weeks later, the investigation reached a major turning point. Sarah called me. You need to come to my office. I arrived immediately. She placed a document on the desk. What is that? The original trust amendment. I looked at it. Then I saw the date. My grandmother had created an additional protection. If anyone attempted to fraudulently transfer the property, the entire property would become protected from any claims by the people involved. In simple terms, Robert couldn't take it. My parents couldn't sell it. And neither could anyone else. But there was another clause. The person who had been unlawfully removed from the property would receive complete ownership rights once they turned 18. That person was me. I stared at the document. Why didn't anyone tell me? Because your grandmother's attorney sealed this document. Why? To protect you. I felt tears in my eyes. My grandmother had known. Maybe she had seen something. Maybe she had sensed that the family wasn't safe. And even after she was gone, she had protected me. Sarah said, There's more. She handed me another paper. It was a letter, written by my grandmother, addressed to me. I unfolded it. The first line made me cry. My dear Emily. My name. Her handwriting. I read slowly. She wrote that she hoped I would never need the protection she had arranged. But if I ever felt like the family had turned against me, I should remember one thing. Your worth was never dependent on whether they believed in you. I covered my mouth. Sarah gave me time. Then I read the final paragraph. If they ever make you feel like you don't belong in the place you call home, don't beg them to let you stay. Build a life so strong that you never need their permission again. I cried, not because I was sad, because for the first time I understood. My grandmother had believed in me when nobody else did, and 8 years later, her words had brought me back to the house, not as a frightened 17-year-old, as its rightful owner. My parents eventually lost control of the property. Robert's claims collapsed. The documents were exposed. The investigation continued, but there was one thing I hadn't expected. My parents asked to see me. I agreed. We met in a small conference room. My father looked older, my mother looked tired. For several minutes nobody spoke. Then my father said, I failed you. I looked at him. Yes. He nodded. I thought I was protecting the family. You were protecting yourself. He looked down. Yes. My mother cried. I've regretted that night every day. I asked, then why didn't you call me? She whispered, we were ashamed. I shook my head. You could have apologized. We were afraid. Of what? That you would hate us. I looked at her. I didn't hate you. She looked up. I hated what you did. That distinction mattered. My father asked, can you forgive us? I thought about it. I can forgive you. He looked relieved. I can't go, nodded. I understand. My mother reached across the table. I didn't take her hand. Not yet, maybe someday, but not that day. Because forgiveness doesn't mean pretending the past never happened. It means refusing to let the past control your future. I stood. I'm not 17 anymore. My father looked at me. I know. I don't need you to save me. He nodded. I know. And I don't need your permission to belong. My mother started crying. I walked out. And for the first time, I didn't feel like the 17-year-old girl carrying a trash bag. I felt free. A year later I sold the house. Not because Robert wanted me to. Not because my parents needed me to. Because I wanted to. I used part of the money to buy a smaller home. A place that had no painful memories. No family secrets. No staircase where someone had told me to leave. No front door I associated with rejection. I kept one thing from the old house. The little silver necklace my grandmother had given me. And I kept her letter. I framed it. Not because I wanted to remember the pain, but because I wanted to remember what came after it. I had once believed being thrown out meant my life was over. It wasn't. It was the beginning. I learned how to survive. Then I learned how to succeed. Then I learned how to forgive without forgetting. And most importantly, I learned that your value isn't decided by the people who fail to see it. My parents thought throwing me out would punish me. Instead, it forced me to build a life they could no longer control. They thought the trash bag represented everything I had lost. Years later, I realized it represented something else. Everything I truly needed fit inside it. A few clothes, a photograph, a necklace, and the courage to keep walking. That's all I had, but somehow, it was enough. 8 years after that rainy night, my parents came to my office because they needed my help. They expected the same girl they had abandoned. The girl who would apologize. The girl who would beg. The girl who would accept whatever they told her. But she was gone. In her place was a woman who knew her worth. A woman who had built a career. A woman who had survived betrayal. A woman who had learned that sometimes the people who push you out of their lives are accidentally pushing you toward the life you were meant to build. And maybe that's the strangest part of my story. I used to wish my parents had never thrown me out. Now I don't. Because if they hadn't, I might never have discovered how strong I was. I might never have met Olivia and her family. I might never have learned to stand on my own. I might never have built my career. I might never have understood my grandmother's final gift. And I might never have learned the truth about my family. So if there's one thing I want you to remember from my story, it's this: being rejected doesn't mean you're worthless. Sometimes people reject you because they can't control you. Sometimes they push you away because they're afraid of what you'll become. And sometimes, the door they slam in your face is the same door that leads you toward a better life. My parents gave me a trash bag. They thought they were throwing away their daughter. They didn't realize they were sending a 17-year-old girl into the world with nothing but a reason to prove them wrong. 8 years later, when they walked into my office, they were looking at the woman that night had created. And for the first time, they understood what they had lost. Not their house, not their money, not their family reputation. They had lost the daughter who once desperately wanted their love. And I had gained something far more valuable. My own life. So I picked up my grandmother's letter one final time. I read her words. Build a life so strong that you never need their permission again. And I smiled, because I had. The end.